Welcome to meeting number 48 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. Pursuant to the order of reference of May 10, 2022, the committee is meeting on Bill C-19, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget, tabled in Parliament on April 7, 2022, and other measures. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Per the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on March 10, 2022, all those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask except for members who are at their places during proceedings. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Now I'd like to welcome today's witnesses. From the Council of Canadian Innovators, we have Dana O'Bourne, Vice President, Strategy and Advocacy. We also have from the Council, Nicholas Schiavo, Director of Federal Affairs. And then from JDRF Canada, Dave Proughton is with us, the President and Chief Executive Officer, and Matt Stimpson. From the Native Women's Association of Canada, Christian Boucher, Senior Director, Government Relations, and Lynn Gru, Chief Executive Officer. And finally, from the Samaritan's Purse Canada, we've got John Clayton, who's the Director of Programs and Projects. So at this time, members, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from our witnesses for 5 minutes of opening remarks for each of them. Well, oui. I do see a point of order. Yeah.
Oui, j'aimerais faire un bref rappel au règlement. Simplement, et je ne veux pas en faire une question politique du tout, mais simplement pour saluer la personne. Chaque parti a ses propres dynamiques, puis tout ça, mais on a eu au cours des...
But over... Is it working? Very well. I don't want to make a political point, but over the past few months, we had a colleague in the committees, Mr. Fest, who did some exceptional work. He worked hard, he was well prepared, and he always asked good questions. I appreciated him a great deal, and before the previous election as well. So I'd simply like to thank him for the contribution that he has made to the committee in the past, and hats off to him.
Merci, Monsieur Samadi. Yes, MP Fast is a well-respected, decent man, so we were happy to have him here while he was here on committee. Are we good, members? Okay, so... And now we'll have an opportunity to hear from our witnesses for their opening remarks. We will begin with the Council of Canadian Innovators for 5 minutes, please.
Good morning to the Chair, Vice Chairs, and members of the Standing Committee on Finance, and thank you for the opportunity to present today on Bill C-19 and the implementation of certain provisions in Budget 2022. My name is Nick Schiavo, and I'm appearing today as the Director of Federal Affairs on behalf of the Council of Canadian Innovators. And I'm joined today by CCI Vice President of Strategy and Advocacy, Dana O'Bourne. We are a national business council representing 150 of Canada's fastest growing companies. Our member companies are headquartered here in Canada, employ north of 52,000 employees across Canada, and are market leaders in the sectors of health, clean, and financial technologies, cybersecurity, and more. Following the release of Budget 2022, CCI celebrated the strong investments in Canadian innovation. We were pleased to see a focus on supporting Canadian innovators, bolstering intellectual property generation, driving clean economic growth, and doubling down on Canada's fastest growing sectors. These investments are a critical step to support Canada's rapidly growing innovation sector and ensure we generate true economic prosperity in the knowledge-based and data-driven economy. However, there is more the government can do to ensure our innovators can scale up and remain competitive in the fast-paced global economy of today. First, Canada's tech sector is facing a skilled talent crisis, which is threatening to suffocate innovative companies and slow new job creation. New strategies and investments to train, attract, and retain top talent are desperately needed, and if done right, these measures will improve Canada's innovation outputs. The shift to remote work, especially in the tech sector, means that Canada's skilled workers are now part of a global labor market where geography is no longer as important. Our domestic innovators are finding themselves in fierce competition with highly profitable foreign tech giants who can offer significantly higher salaries for the same pool of high-skilled workers. In April, CCI released our talent and skill strategy with 13 key recommendations to meet the talent needs of our country's fastest-growing companies. Broadly speaking, these recommendations present ideas for the attraction, generation, and retention of skilled talent in Canada. The federal government has started to work on valuable investments in upskilling, which is an important step forward on generating more skilled talent. Deploying funding in ways that create the maximum benefit for innovators should be a key priority in the months ahead. Recently, we have seen Canadian technology companies take the lead in developing their own skilled training programs. The federal government should support these types of company-led initiatives and tailor funding to ensure that we are generating skills to meet market needs. Moreover, the government's funding for skills development programs should be bolstered with policies to ease immigration pathways for skilled workers. Immigration is the fastest route to boosting supply of skilled labor in Canada, and the federal government should consider policies like a high-potential tech visa and a digital nomad strategy. The second item I'd like to speak about is the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentive Program, lovingly known as SR&ED in the innovation ecosystem. This $3 billion program is intended to incentivize research and development, but in practice, the program is overly complicated, bureaucratic, and restrictive. We were pleased to see in Budget 2022 that the government is moving ahead with a review of SR&ED to modernize and streamline the program. We are currently undertaking the policy work to offer detailed and substantive recommendations for how to ensure that SR&ED is fit for purpose. However, in broad terms, we believe that SR&ED reform should focus on expanding the tax credit to include intellectual property as a key component of R&D. In the 21st century knowledge economy, patents and other forms of IP are the most critical sources of economic advantage for firms and economies. In 2020, more than 91% of the value in the S&P 500 came from intangible assets. And as the pandemic continues to drive a wave of digitization, algorithms, patents, data, and other intangible assets will only become more important. As Canada looks towards the post-pandemic economy of tomorrow, Canadian intellectual property and its acceleration by programs like SR&ED will be a driving force. Including a patent box tax structure in SR&ED would be a big step in the right direction to ensure that IP generated in Canada continues to reside in Canada. And we were pleased to see this idea mentioned in Budget 2022. We also believe costs associated with developing and prosecuting intellectual property should be eligible under SR&ED. Lastly, but perhaps most importantly, SR&ED eligibility criteria and processes should be streamlined and clarified. Today, many tech companies rely on costly consultants to help them navigate SR&ED, and we would all be much better served if that money was spent on innovation outputs rather than a cottage industry of professionals who help navigate a thicket of confusing regulations. To conclude, we are pleased to see Budget 2022 offer a number of smart investments for Canada's innovation ecosystem. It's clear the government is thinking about how best to position the Canadian economy for the 21st century. To ensure they have the maximum impact on our shared prosperity, we look to the government to implement these policies in the most effective and strategic way possible. Thank you, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schiavo. And now we'll hear from JDRF Canada.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. My name is Dave Proughton. I'm the President and CEO of JDRF, the leading charitable funder of type 1 diabetes research. And today I'm joined by Mr. Matt Stimpson, who is a person living with type 1 diabetes and also the proud father of a wonderful young woman, Tilly, who's 14 years old, who also lives with type 1 diabetes. So first of all, thank you for inviting us back to committee today. We are here again to reiterate our request to propose an amendment to the Budget Implementation Act that would remove or reduce the 14-hour requirement under the life-sustaining category of the disability tax credit. This change would make life better for the 300,000 Canadians that live with this disease 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The 14-hour requirement really is arbitrary and antiquated and has not been changed since 1988. And since then, diabetes management has come a long way and lives have drastically improved, but only with the right supports and technologies. And type 1 diabetes continues to be a very costly disease for everyone, for individuals, families, the healthcare systems, and society overall. So we implore the committee to amend the Budget Implementation Act and call for either a removal of the 14-hour requirement entirely, or alternatively, a reduction in the hours to 7, so that more Canadians with type 1 diabetes can qualify. And we know there's a willingness to make the change because it's evidenced in the budget to include additional criteria that will help more people qualify, but there's still a level of interpretation around the amount of time per week on these activities. So our proposal to remove or reduce to 7 hours is really not arbitrary. It will be very clean and clear, and it will really make it easier for the healthcare practitioners to approve and improve equity for those with type 1. And the purpose of the disability tax credit is to really ensure that Canadians with a disability are eased of financial burdens. And this arbitrary and antiquated requirement for 14 hours is really preventing many with type 1 diabetes to access this, and therefore the policy is not living up to its mandate. It needs to be modernized to ensure it's delivering the support to some of the most vulnerable Canadians who can use this support right now. And in our opinion, we have a very rare opportunity. This is an important change. JDRF has been working on improving the disability tax credits since 2017, so that's 5 years. So the time to get it right is now. And I'm going to turn it over to Matt, Mr. Stimpson, to share with you his personal experience with the disability tax credit. So Matt, over to you.
Thank you, Dave. My name's Matt Stimpson. Good morning, everyone. I'm here today because I've experienced firsthand major issues with the disability tax credit as it stands. To give you a bit of background, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 2005, and I was encouraged by the nurses at the Adult Diabetes Education Centre at the hospital and my accountant to apply for this. Because being self-employed, I have no healthcare benefits. My daughter was then diagnosed when she was 2.5, and as Dave has said, she's now 14. So basically all of her sort of conscious childhood, she's had type 1 diabetes. My wife hasn't slept properly for over a decade because she worries about nighttime low blood sugars. Type 1 diabetes has been, well, a part of our lives for as long as I can remember. We've had to worry about sort of paying for insulin supplies, advanced glucose monitoring devices and insulin pumps. Those costs exist regardless of how much time is spent per week on management. And it really doesn't matter if I spend 14 hours a week or 100 hours a week on management. I am constantly worrying about this condition and my child's condition, and it's 24/7, 365. We spend around $1,500 a month for our diabetes supplies that aren't covered publicly. And as I said earlier, as a small business owner, I don't have private coverage. The pump supplies are $300 each per month. Insulin is $120 per month. We use flash glucose monitors because they're more affordable than the advanced glucose monitors, but they're still $190 a month. There's test strips at $60 a month, glucagon at $300 a year, ketone strips at $25 a year, $25 per box, and then dextrose tablets to deal with sort of the daily lows. In the past, my family doctor refused to sign forms simply because he didn't agree that spending 14 hours a week managing my diabetes was realistic. However, he had no trouble signing Tilly's forms, and we have exactly the same disease. So it's inequitable, and some people are approved, some people aren't, even if they have the same condition. Unfortunately, if you're not aware of how to fight and advocate for yourself, you end up with the shorter end of the stick. The current eligibility process is a bit of an administrative nightmare, and I strongly believe that time spent on type 1 diabetes is irrelevant because it doesn't affect the thousands of dollars per year that it costs me and my family to survive. So lastly, I'd love to thank JDRF for all their continued advocacy and appreciate the opportunity to appear before this committee. I truly hope you'll support the proposed amendment and remove or reduce the 14-hour threshold to make the disability tax credit more equitable and accessible for all Canadians living with type 1 diabetes. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Matt, for sharing your story. Now we'll hear from the Native Women's Association of Canada, and members, just to let you know, the Native Women's Association of Canada will only be able to be with us till 12 noon. So if you do have questions for them, you may want to focus those in the first part of our meeting. For 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Miigwech, Monsieur le Président, et merci aux membres du...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me this opportunity today. I'd like to point out that we are meeting on the traditional and unceded territory of the Anishinaabeg Algonquin people who have been living on this land since time immemorial. My name is Lynn Grew, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Native Women's Association of Canada. I'm accompanied by Christian Boucher. The NWAC is the national Indigenous organization and the political voice of women, girls, and Indigenous people of various gender identities in Canada, including First Nations living on and off reserve status and not status, as well as individuals who have been deprived of their rights, the Métis and the Inuit. The NWC is the largest Indigenous group in the country for women.
Country from all provinces and territories with the collective goal to enhance, promote, advocate for human rights of Indigenous women, that is, the social, political, economic, cultural, and well-being of Indigenous women, their families, and communities. Through advocacy, legislative analysis, policy, programs, and direct service delivery, NWAC works each and every day to preserve Indigenous culture and advance the well-being of Indigenous women and speak out about racism and discrimination and violence in all of its forms. While Budget 2022 contains some meaningful and long overdue investments, it is clear to NWAC that more needs to be done to end systemic violence and gross human rights violations faced by Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA people. Today, I would like to focus on 5 main issues. 1, MMIWG, 2, housing, 3, healthcare infrastructure, 4, food security, and 5, over-incarceration. And you will notice that these are all deal with basic human rights. First, on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people. Budget 2022 mysteriously contains no new funding for action. While the budget cites some funding committed in Budget 2021, to see such a glaring lack of recognition and lack of investment in answering the 231 calls for justice in the Budget 22 is alarming. We don't even know if or where the funding from 2021 was actually dispersed. The National Inquiry handed down 231 legal imperatives, not 231 recommendations and not 231 suggestions. They're legal obligations. The issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, we know amounts to a genocide. This is the conclusion of a $92 million inquiry with thousands of testimony and a 1,000+ page report. We expected to see the federal government take action in a concrete way in this budget. That means committing additional and necessary funding to end this genocide of Indigenous women and girls. Also mysteriously, no mention of MMIWG or Indigenous women in Minister Miller's statement of accomplishments following his 100 days as Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations issued on February 7th. We at NWAC just want women to be safe, and we need dedicated resources to ensure that this happens. Second, on housing. Housing was hugely underfunded based on the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation and the National Housing Advisory's own recommendations, who proposed over $4 billion per year for 10 years to effectively address the housing crisis. This budget, however, only commits $4 billion to spread out over 7 years. While this funding will have some impact, it will not end the housing crisis faced by Indigenous people, especially in remote and isolated communities where the cost to build and maintain housing is higher. The impact of decent housing on the safety and security and health of Indigenous women and their families cannot be understated. The housing crisis in many Indigenous communities has gone on for far too long. We have to see an end. We have to see an end to the situations of houses that need major repairs, including houses with mold, overcrowding, and extremely long wait lists. There's also an issue with couch surfing. There's an issue with homelessness. We still have children being removed from houses because they do not have their own bedroom. Third, on healthcare infrastructure. In Budget 2022, increased investments to improve health outcomes in rural and northern First Nation communities are not long-term commitments with funding only guaranteed for a single year. NWAC would like to see more long-term investments in healthcare infrastructure in all Indigenous communities. This was a glaring omission in the wake of the shocking treatment and subsequent death of Joyce Echaquan. Indigenous people seeking healthcare must be able to do so without fear, safely, and in a culturally appropriate environment. And first of all, of course, it needs to be available. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed significant socioeconomic and health inequities faced by Indigenous people in Canada, inequities that can no longer be denied or ignored. But this budget and subsequent BIA do little to address the needs of Indigenous people and their communities in this situation.
Ms. Guru, I apologize for interrupting, but you need to wrap up shortly. A few seconds left.
Okay, well, I did mention the 5 areas, and I'm going to repeat that with just an emphasis on the final point, which is the situation of over-incarceration and an investment that we would like to see in terms of investment in the system to end what is representation in federal prisons of now 50% of Indigenous women that are in prison today, when they represent only 4% of the population. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Guru, and you will have an opportunity to expand on that in members' question time.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from the Samaritans Purse Canada for 5 minutes, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today concerning Bill C-19 and specifics in the Budget Implementation Act related to charities. I've spent 30 years working in the charitable sector. Back in August of 2019, Samaritan's Purse studied the Senate report on the charitable sector, specifically the pages concerning CRA direction and control. We decided to pursue changes to ITA legislation to correct problems we and many other charities in Canada have been experiencing. Samaritan's Purse then joined Cooperation Canada, where I'm the co-chair of their direction and control working group. I don't know the precise history, but about 70 years ago, the Government of Canada enacted legislation in the ITA that enabled charities to function, but required that they only pursue their own activities. And subsequent to this, the CRA policy was developed around this idea. I need to mention that the idea of own activities is unique to Canada. No other country uses this concept, and every other country has found ways to hold their nonprofits accountable without using this idea of own activities. Own activities is the cause of the problems we are dealing with today and these issues within the Budget Implementation Act. Cooperation Canada, Imagine Canada, and Philanthropic Foundations Canada, together with a group of Canada's leading charity lawyers and Senator Ahmedvar, worked together for the last 2 years bringing forward Bill S-216. Bill S-216 would have eliminated own activities requirements. But in the last days, and after 2 years of advocating for changes to the Income Tax Act, this year's budget announcement indicated that the charitable sector's concerns had been heard. We were grateful for this and considered it a great success. However, our initial euphoria turned to concern when the details of the BIA emerged. The BIA proposes changes to the Income Tax Act that would add new rules allowing charities to make qualifying disbursements or grants to non-qualified donees. The qualifying disbursement mechanism is a workaround to the problem of own activities. The BIA claims this would provide the needed funding mechanism for charities to work with non-charities, and that this was in the spirit of Bill S-216. But what the BIA proposes is not in the spirit of 216. Instead, it would add 800 words of tightly defined, inflexible, and prescriptive terms and conditions to the ITA. The BIA proposed qualifying disbursement mechanism will not work and will not be used by charities. Charities need to work with non-charities. This happens in Canada and around the world. The ways these partnerships and arrangements take shape is complicated and is determined by contextual realities, current events, cultures, and a myriad of other factors. I'll give some examples. In the last months, Samaritan's Purse, my organization, and many other organizations have responded to the Ukraine crisis. We are currently working with 17 local partners across Europe that are providing assistance to Ukrainian refugees. Another aspect of international work, many charities are affiliated and parts of larger networks. When they come together to respond to events like Ukraine, they need to be able to easily combine or pool their resources in a common response. This increases effectiveness and efficiency. Other charities are engaged in long-term development projects involving multiple partners, complex programs, funders, and local governments. Lastly, within our own country, the government provides funding to charities, expecting them to work with community groups, marginalized, racialized, and Indigenous groups, and other non-charities. I need to make it clear, the BIA's proposed inflexible terms and conditions don't work in any of these contexts. The qualifying disbursement mechanism would provide a one-size-fits-all regulatory straitjacket. The qualifying disbursement mechanism doesn't fit the real world. With this approach, we appear to be taking the problems of own activities and making them worse. Charities will avoid using this mechanism and its codified rules in the ITA because any failure to perfectly comply would result in a loss of charitable status. If the BIA proceeds as is, we would see a combination of ITA regulation and CRA policy and a regulatory hierarchy that would be complicated and confusing. This should not be allowed to happen. If we're going to work around the problem of own activities, we need to make amendments to the BIA to connect a qualifying disbursement mechanism to the practical realities and operations of charities. We all acknowledge the need for accountability. The CRA needs to monitor and enforce policy where tax-protected dollars are involved. Charities themselves are concerned about integrity and the public trust they must preserve with their donors. Nobody is asking for relaxed or reduced accountability. We need appropriate accountability for practical, workable mechanisms for engagement with non-qualified donees. The BIA, as is, will not provide this. The committee has already heard earlier this week from Bruce McDonald of Imagine Canada, and the committee has received a detailed briefing note that was from the three organizations, Imagine Canada, Cooperation Canada, and Philanthropic Foundations Canada, and was also signed on by 66 significant Canadian charities. If I have time, I'd like to restate the three specific amendments we are seeking to refine and...
Yeah, no, Mr. Clayton, I'm sure you're going to have an opportunity during question time, but we are well over already the time for opening remarks. But we thank you, Mr. Clayton, all the witnesses for your opening remarks, and we're going to move quickly so you have all the time into members' questions. So the first round, each party will have up to 6 minutes to ask witnesses questions. We'll begin with the Conservatives, and I have MP Stewart up for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank all the witnesses for being here today. Special shout out to JDRF. I'm very encouraged that you're here again today, and my questions will be for you today. My first question is to Matt Stimpson. When we talk about type 1 diabetes, we often look at it from the view of children who have diabetes. However, these children become adults. Could you explain the difficulty adults with type 1 diabetes have in accessing the disability tax credit? Is there equal access?
Personally, I don't feel so because I've had to really justify my position to just get the forms signed versus my daughter who there was no question. They just signed them and it was fine. So, and diabetes, type 1 diabetes can hit you at any age. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 32. So it's not, we should try and get away from the fact that it's juvenile diabetes, it's type 1 diabetes. But yes, there is a huge disparity, even between doctors. I've heard all sorts of stories. I've had to pay an endocrinologist $100 to sign a form because that's what they charged. So.
Thank you for that. Clearly, there seems to be an arbitrary battle between doctors and bureaucracy. My second question is the government proposing to now allow the counting of exercise restrictions or regimes as part of the calculation of the 14 hours of life-sustaining therapy? Does JDRF know what this means? does this create confusion where some with type 1 diabetes who walk to work may not be eligible, but someone who trains for a marathon does? How are patients and doctors supposed to interpret this? Is there a potential for the Canada Revenue Agency to apply this in an inconsistent and arbitrary basis?
I'll take a crack at that one. I would say that there are encouraging revisions that are being proposed, but I do think there is a level of arbitrary nature to them, right? Because they would be open to interpretation from a healthcare practitioner. And that is really why we are proposing the reduction in hours, right? Or the elimination of the hours, because at the end of the day, you do need life-sustaining therapy. That's insulin is by definition a life-sustaining therapy. So we are trying to remove the arbitrary nature of this of these terms right now.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer, and you'll be happy to know that I'm proposing an amendment that will be used during the clause by clause, and I'll get to that in my second round with you today. Final question for this round. I would ask Mr. Stimpson, do you currently qualify for the DTC?
Yes,
and
I do.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Did your daughter qualify for the one-time $600 payment for persons with disability related to the COVID pandemic?
Yes, she did.
Okay, that's good, because as National Revenue Critic, I've received emails where effectively two people with the same medical condition in the same household and didn't receive the same benefit. I've seen other situations. Go ahead, sir.
I would fall into that category. My daughter got it. I didn't. So.
Yes, I appreciate your answer. It really shows. It shows what bureaucracy and not having a concise plan can do to people living with type 1 diabetes. I appreciate your answers here in this first round. Thank you.
MP Stewart is.
MP Stewart.
Yeah, you still have 2 minutes. It was mine. Yeah, I know I said too earlier,
okay,
but it's
great.
2 minutes. Yeah, my apologies.
I think the chair just admitted that I'm his favorite. You're the one. That's awesome.
So you got still 2 minutes. Still 2 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
So just for this last round, if you could, either one of you, could you just shed a little bit of light on the disability tax credit really quickly and really talk about how it's not working for everyone with type 1 diabetes?
Well, I mean, I'll take a quick crack at this. I mean, Mr. Stimpson gave a great example, right? He's got two members in his family. One got it automatically. One had to sort of fight to get it. And we hear that story a lot. We did a survey of our constituents base, and 43% said they were either denied or had difficulty getting it, right? So that's very odd to us that there would be that significant amount. And, the other question I would pose is, what happens when Matt's daughter, Tilly, becomes an adult? Does she then, and she has to reapply, which you always have, you have to reapply for the disability tax credit. Does she then lose something that she's had for? So, we are concerned about different stages in the process for all the families and people living with type 1 diabetes.
A little bit more time. Okay, one more thing. Is there a medical or common sense reason the government doesn't allow the counting of carbohydrates as part of the 14 hours per week? It seems to me important to properly count the carbs to avoid overdosing on insulin.
Yeah, I don't understand that either, because I've not met a non-diabetic that carb counts, and that's a huge part of our diabetes management, even to the point where my endocrinologist suggested I bought little remote scales that I can take into a restaurant to weigh food, which doesn't sound particularly practical as your food is being served. So I've never understood that, and I would always push for that to be included, because it's such a huge part of diabetes management. Of everything we put into our mouth, we have to consider.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Stewart. And then we'll hear from the Liberals. MP Zerowitz for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the presenters today for their very important contribution to our deliberations. Before I begin my questions, I too want to both acknowledge and thank Mr. Ed Fast for his contributions to this committee. He'll be missed, and so I want to make sure that we began with that. All my questions are going to be directed to the Council of Canadian Innovators. So my first question is, one of the comments you had mentioned, Mr. Chavio, is that there needs to be some adjustments in the immigration pathways for skilled workers. Could you explain how, in the context of Canadian Innovators, how you're defining the skilled workers that you're looking for, and what specifically are you looking to have changed within the immigration system?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, as we mentioned, there are a number of recommendations that we're putting forward in terms of getting more skilled talent to Canada. And so in addition to upskilling, we think, you know, the fastest route to get that skilled talent to our innovators is through the immigration system. We are a designated partner in the global talent stream. And so we are very, you know, accustomed to working with government to get the right people where they need to be. Unfortunately, there's a number of restrictions on those programs that don't go far enough. And I would also add that in our conversations with folks at IRCC, we know that there is a major backlog as a result of the pandemic. So to your point, some of the key recommendations that we are proposing are the development of a digital nomad strategy and a high potential tech visa. Now, these aren't silver bullets. There is no silver bullet to talent. But the idea behind both of these is how do we bring more skilled talent to Canada in an easier way and increase the labor density? The idea being the more skilled talent is nearby our Canadian innovators, the more they integrate into our communities, into our economy, and ideally choose to work for those Canadian companies. So these are two very kind of innovative strategies that we would love to see developed, and I think are in line with the spirit of Budget 2022. And then in addition to that, you know, just pushing IRCC to be more ambitious. So instead of that 2-week timeline for the global talent stream, could we move that to 48 hours? Could we develop a concierge service so that folks who come here as skilled talent have an easier time integrating into permanent residency? There's a number of solutions.
Yeah, Mr. Chavio, I do have to move on. I have like 2 other big questions to ask you.
By all means, yes.
I think I have the gist of it. I do want to let you know we do have a global skills talent stream. It does allow some of the top talent in the world to be able to be admitted within our immigration system within a 2-week time frame. There is an additional cost for it, but that's something I'd encourage you to look into if you do not know about it. But I appreciate your recommendations. The question I have for you is around your comments around a patent box. So I know that you're very supportive of that. I just want you to define a patent box regime, and if you could just explain what impact it will have on our ability to protect Canadian IP.
Mm-hmm. I think for this one, it might be better to hear from our Vice President, Dana, who can field that one.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick. So effectively a patent box regime is a tax treatment for how patents are basically manifested in a certain jurisdiction. So this actually came about from a couple of our members, one of them out in British Columbia, AbCellera, who had been given the advice from some of their consultants to offshore their patents to lower tax jurisdictions to be able to get the most benefit out of them. So effectively a patent box is a tax treatment to ensure that patents stay in Canada and work for the benefit of Canadians.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing, it's really a lower tax regime that will basically incentivize R&D, and it's going to be ensuring that by doing that, we're going to be keeping the IP in Canada. So thanks for that. We heard the other day that we need an IP strategy that also focuses on the freedom to operate. Would you agree to that as well?
Yes.
Okay. And freedom to operate is just, it's basically a strategy by protecting our own Canadian IP and then finding a way to ensure that the products that are sold, basically that you understand how we are able to sell and move forward along the chain without infringing on other companies' IP rights. Okay, so that's helpful. We also have the Innovation Asset Collective. There was also a recommendation that we need to massively increase the investment in the Innovation Asset Collective, one in terms of educating around IP and creating a culture of IP protection. Would you also agree with that?
Yes, indeed. If I can just expand briefly on that comment, the Innovation Asset Collective was announced, I believe, in the budget 2018, right before 2019, right before everything, the world changed, was given $30 million as effectively a pilot program, but had a focus on digital and clean technology. And you probably heard from one of our colleagues, Jim Hinton, about the expansion of the patent regime under the IAC. And indeed, CCI agrees full-heartedly that that should be expanded and made permanent and expanded into other sectors as well.
Thank you, and thank you, MP
okay,
Zerowitz.
Thank you so much.
That's the time. And now hearing from the bloc, MP Sainte-Marie.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to wish you all a happy Shivanka Day. We are dealing with this war in Ukraine, so I'd like to wish all of my Ukrainian fellows a good day. And we have someone with us today who is a Ukrainian, and I had a brief conversation with her. She speaks very good French. She has 5 languages under the belt, and she talked to me about the situation with her family. So I think about the Ukrainian people on Vishnika Day. That was my first point. Secondly, a comment for Mr. Clayton from Samaritan's Purse. Thank you very much. Your situation is very clear. We have received other witnesses, such as Mr. McDonald, who explained the problem, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to make amendments that would resolve the problem. As you said, Mr. Chair, the Native Women's Association of Canada, I would like to say hello to Mr. Boucher and Ms. Grue and give Madame Grue the time to complete her presentation if she wishes to do so. Thank you.
C'est tellement gentil. Merci.
That's very kind of you. I really do appreciate this opportunity you've given me.
Given an opportunity to continue with a few points that I wanted to make. And there was one on food security. So food security has been an ongoing serious problem in Indigenous communities and was only exacerbated to the COVID-19 pandemic. And now communities are struggling due to the rising cost with inflation. While Budget 2020 did provide funding to expand Nutrition North Canada program, Budget 2022 contains no new investments to improve food security in Indigenous communities. As food prices skyrocket across the country, more funding is desperately needed to appropriately address this crisis. And in Métis language that we speak, there is only so much macaroni you can eat. Something has to be done about this. And our communities are getting sick from this kind of food that they're eating. It is not quality food, and this is something that's happening. Finally, I did want to speak a little bit longer on the incarceration. We know that it's completely out of control. Report after report is coming out. Indigenous women make up 50% of the federally sentenced prisons, and they only represent 4%. Manitoba and Saskatchewan, it's absolutely shocking. 85% of the population are Indigenous women in these prisons. It's a large-scale injustice perpetrated in Canada that is going on. We have a pipeline from residential schools to prisons. The over-incarceration rate of women, this has been recognized as a crisis, even at the international level with the UN Special Rapporteur. It's a form of violence against women, and we need to start untangling this tangled web that we have called colonization. When are we going to start? How are we going to start? Investments have to be made in communities. We have to provide communities with resources so that they themselves, we ourselves, can take some of these situations in our own hands and have programs, healing programs, to keep our women and out of prisons when that is possible, to do so in the community. These are the points that I wanted to make, and I appreciate that extra time that you've given me. Thank you.
Merci à vous, Miigwech, Madame Grue.
Thank you, Madame Grue and Miigwech. You've listed 11 important issues. We've noted them. Thank you for sharing them with us. According in your organization, have you had a chance to study C19, which is so lengthy, and have you looked at the main issues? Are there elements that you like in the bill? And have you any amendments that you would like to make to the bill to improve it? And also, could you remind us what are the good things that are coming out of the budget and where do we need to take action? Could you be more specific? Thank you very much. That's a big question. Yes, indeed. We did have an opportunity to look at the budget. What's essential for us deals with MMIW. We have to have some type of investment in this. It's urgent. There are community programs that could work at a cost that's not excessively high. We have to really go back to that. It's pressing. We have just seen some recent statistics on incarcerated women, and this continues. There's something that's not working. We have to give back the power to our women, to our communities, to implement these programs. We need resources to do so. So I'd really like to emphasize this. Nothing in the budget on this issue. Please, could you consider doing this individually here in the committee? Thank you very much. You're very clear. Miigwech, thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you very much for recognizing Vyshyvanka Day. And we do all stand with Ukraine, and we do have many Ukrainian interns here, like Louise, who's in my office and speaks, yes, as you said, 5 languages. Very impressive. We are now going to hear from the NDP on questions, and we'll have MP Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I too will just take a quick moment to acknowledge the work of Mr. Fast on the committee before his departure. And I want to ask Ms. Grew before she has to leave. I just wonder, you started already, but if you could maybe paint a picture of what some of the programs are that are possible with more federal funding on the MMIWG file, what that would look and what that would look like. How do we get started today if there's already some money set aside so that we can figure out how much more is required going forward?
Thank you very much. There are indeed some examples of programming right now. There's many communities talking about healing centers. These are really needed very badly. We at the Native Women's Association of Canada actually started one of our own. We had to do it with the Bank of Montreal. We had to do it with private investment. We could not receive the infrastructure money we received. It's complicated to get infrastructure money. It's complicated to get operational money. Sometimes you get infrastructure money and you don't get the operational money, you get the operational money, you don't get the infrastructure money. Something has to be done about this. The communities need healing centers. There's examples. There's even examples at the international level. Mexico, for example, has a model called Casa de la Mujer Indígena, their House of Indigenous Women. They are resourced. They're run by Indigenous women themselves. These are the kind of programs we need. So if we could have some assistance with that, we would appreciate it. We literally can save lives this way. It's putting the communities in charge of their own healing process, their own path to healing and safety and security. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your advocacy here today. And thank you for providing some concrete examples of how that funding can help make a difference here in Canada. I wanted to ask Mr. Clayton, I know you had said in your opening remarks, you had 3 specific amendments that you thought would be useful in respect of the direction and control provisions in the BIA. Just hoping that you can share those with the committee now.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. As I mentioned, these amendments were submitted to this committee by Imagine Canada, Cooperation Canada, and the Philanthropic Foundations. These are 3 years specifically to change the qualifying disbursement mechanism and remove reference to having it meet prescribed conditions and replace it with a requirement instead that makes it reasonable steps to ensure resources are dispersed. So this would be the first one. The second one would be to amend language related to directed giving. This is also mentioned in the BIA. This would allow Canadian charities to contribute to pooled funds supporting non-qualified donees. Lastly, this would be to delete proposed regulation 37703. This is, I don't know the exact number, but it's close to 800 words of new regulatory requirements. This would allow for regulations to be in CRA guidance instead and not codified rules within the Income Tax Act. So those would be the three big things, the amendments that we would look to that would take this tremendous development within the charitable sector and allow this qualifying disbursement mechanism to actually function in the real world.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Grew, with what time I have remaining, I know this wasn't the focus of your presentation, but one of the claims that's being made about the provisions in the Budget Implementation Act in respect of charity direction and control is that it makes it harder for charities to partner with Indigenous organizations. I've just wondered if you had any examples out of your own experience and the experience of your organization where the current charitable rules have gotten in the way of funding projects. And if not, that's okay. As I say, I recognize that wasn't the thrust of your own remarks here at the committee, but if you do have an example, I would welcome you to share it.
I happen to have an example. So we ourselves have had to apply for a charitable status, and there seems to be just an undue delay and a complication there for some reason. So this could be causing some problems to other organizations as well. But I do have to say that the private sector is stepping up in an accelerated way. So we're being contacted by many different organizations and many different companies, but we have an impediment when it comes to the paperwork and the bureaucracy around it. So hopefully, that could be resolved, but I'm not sure if there's another point there that I may not be aware of in terms of what's going on with the charity and paperwork.
Okay, well, thank you very much. As I say, I know I was asking you to go outside the scope of your initial presentation, so that's no problem at all. Mr. Chair, how am I doing for time?
You've got about a minute, MP Blakey.
Okay, so maybe I'll just go back to you, Mr. Clayton, to talk a little bit more about where and how this kind of strong culture of direction and control has interfered with charitable organizations partnering with other organizations here in Canada who are doing work with various cultural communities and with Indigenous organizations.
Yeah, well, I just state from the outset that my experience isn't so much here in Canada, but largely working internationally. But I know from the work that we did last week on Hill Days when we were in Ottawa meeting with many of you and your staff talking about these issues, that direction and control is our own activities combined with direction and control is an impediment to achieving equitable partnerships and relationships with local community groups and others that are supposed to be able to access funds. So it contributes to the inaccessibility of the system or funds that are available to be activated into local communities. So it was very interesting to hear this Indigenous perspective of what's going on and the need for community programming. This impediment stands in the way of doing this, and this proposed, what is currently in the BIA would continue to be that continued impediment to being able to connect with Indigenous communities.
Thank you, and thank you MP Blakey. That concludes our first round, members. We're moving into our second round, and we have the Conservatives up. MP Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My questions will focus around own activities, direction and control, and charitables. And thank you, Mr. Clayton, for all the great work that you do, and not just within Samaritan's Purse, but also I know you've been active for many years on this front of direction and control. So I just want to clarify one thing, and I had a similar discussion with Bruce McDonald, but the idea with the amendments that you would be suggesting is not to reduce the amount of accountability and transparency, and in fact, it actually may increase it. What you are attempting to do is put a different type of accountability, one that puts substance over forms. While the 800 words that will require a lot of forms and a lot of lawyer fees and a lot of bureaucrats, it won't provide any greater substantive review or transparency or accountability. Am I correct in suggesting that, Mr. Clayton?
Yeah, the accountability frameworks that we are proposing would emerge from CRA guidance that would be developed according to the amendments that would be put into place. So again, nobody wants less accountability. We need accountability that's appropriate with the mechanisms that we have to work with. So I think there's a great opportunity that's before us. It's been 70 years. It's been 70 years since this specific legislation has been opened up and potentially amended with what's being proposed here. So all of us are very concerned about not wanting to make this situation worse, to make it something that's accessible for these funding mechanisms to work, but also to protect the accountability that we have both for tax protected dollars and to our donor constituencies that want to see us with integrity in terms of the public trust.
Thank you very much. And then it's one thing to talk about sort of the legal semantics of direction and control and own activities, but I think it's important also to draw people's attention that this has real world consequences. If in fact you were able to get your amendments through that would reduce the amount of burden and paperwork and really the legal fiction that own activities has created, that will result in to put it simply, more good being done, meaning that girls who wouldn't be able to access education will get it. Children who are hungry will get food, will get more food. Indigenous and other unique populations will be given more opportunities if we are able to get your amendments through. Is that your testimony? Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, I think, when I look back on my history working within the current system, I've lost count of the things that we've said no to because we can't establish these parameters of own activities, or we can't negotiate an agreement with someone and offend them with telling them they're going to have to do this work on our behalf. This is a challenge that is faced by every charity that wants to work together in partnership with local entities. So making these amendments or making this, the preferred amendment or the preferred path has always been to get rid of own activities. That doesn't seem to be on the table. So we're looking at a workaround, and I think it is a viable workaround for us, and that will open up greater opportunities for us to be able to engage in partnerships and to be able to say yes to things currently that we've had to say no to, or alternately, where I know my friend Celine in Oxfam, Quebec, when we go together with our Oxfams around the world and try to work together, or when I'm working with Samaritan's Purse around the world, we have to deal with this a strange aspect of trying to define our own activities when we're pooling our resources together in a combined disaster response. So it really is an impediment. We need to clear it away. We need the amendments to be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clayton. And you make a persuasive argument. I'm confident that members of the government are listening intently to your comments. I'm just, for the last 40 seconds or so, Mr. Chair.
That's correct.
I'm just going to switch to Canadian innovators. So you'd had some discussions about shred review, about a patent box. It's anyone who's heard me speak. I believe that the Canadian Income Tax Code is due for a massive revision, and in fact, I believe that it is right now not a advantage. In fact, it is a disadvantage for Canadian businesses. Many of the sections are archaic. Many of them are full of onerous regulations that don't even make sense anymore in the modern world. Would you be in favor of a more modern, a more effective, more competitive Income Tax Act? That's for the Canadian innovators.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yes, I would definitely agree with that comment that quite archaic and very difficult to navigate through, which is why people like us are probably employed. But our piece rings true on shred as well, which is really what we're here to talk about today. But modernizing, streamlining, and making systems more effective for companies, I think, will reduce regulatory burden, which is critical for growth in the innovation and data-driven economy.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Lawrence. And we're moving to the Liberals. MP McDonald for 5 minutes.
You hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and I'll echo the sentiments of Ed Fast. Appreciate his professionalism on this committee. I want to go to Council of Canadian Innovators. You talk about Canadian innovation and creating an investment agency. You noted the frameworks and policies must be in place to ensure it's successful, and so on and so forth. So we put forth in Budget 2022 $15 billion Canadian Growth Fund to attract private sector investment and job creation. What's the best utilization and process of this funding going forward, and will it help your industry?
Thank you very much for the question, and I'll just jump in here. I think we actually had this conversation at a pre-budget consultation about creating some of the structures and marketplace frameworks that will require that funding from government goes to benefit Canadians. And so on this investment agency, we're still waiting for details, and recognizing that Minister Freeland had said that we'll see more of that in the fall economic statement. But I think this sort of generates a discussion around the benefits and just maximizing investments for Canadian companies versus what that looks like for attracting foreign direct investment into Canada, and how sometimes those strategies end up actually hurting Canadian companies. And so when we talk about investment attraction, and I'll use the very perfect example of Amazon when they were doing their shopping internationally for HQ2, we had a number of Canadian companies step forward and say, I don't understand why governments, and not just Canadian governments, municipal and provincial as well, are raising, the white flag to attract this type of investment that's only going to eat up our talent, suck away our customers, and make the marketplace less competitive for companies like ours. So certainly recognizing that the investment agency is part of Budget 2022. Look forward to details, but I think it will be critical in terms of making sure that the structures, in terms of what those terms and conditions look like for that investment to come into Canada, to create the economic outputs that we require for prosperity, productivity, et cetera, will be really important.
Thanks. I know in 2019, I believe it was a record-setting year for investment at $6.2 billion in Canadian companies, so that was good. And there was a large venture capital investment in 2021. It was about $450 million, or approximately. Don't quote me on that number. But I guess, we talked a lot on this committee, and maybe even previously to some of your predecessors that were on here, about the IP strategy. I'm just wondering, foreign direct investment, do we require an additional strategy on foreign direct, on the FDI part of an investment cycle of new companies in Canada?
It's a really interesting question, and I think even more relevant at this particular moment in time, because probably many of you are seeing, market slumps and, the stock markets, and a lot of tech companies that were valued at very high valuations only 6 months ago are below their IPO listing share price. But I think as we think about how we need to attract investment into Canada, and how, my dog is trying to join the session today, apologies, work from home, how we need to attract investment into Canada also will require some of those marketplace frameworks I talked about, and in one of your colleagues' previous questions today around getting IP strategies right, getting data and marketplace frameworks right, i.e. what happens to a foreign company when they come and set up a branch plant operation in Canada? How do we create those structures? Do we still provide SR&ED tax credits to them? Do we allow them to come in and harness data without paying tax on that data, for commercial benefit? So, I think the concept of FDI is a very broad one. It's investment, it's branch plant operations, it's economic activity that is done from outside organizations. And simply and always, our mandate and mission has been level the playing field, because for so long, Canadian companies have had a really hard time competing in their own jurisdiction.
Thank you. And a quick, do I have much time, Chair?
You got 15 seconds, MP McDonald. I'm sure you.
Well, thank you, and say hello to your dog for us.
What's your dog's name?
Her name's Honey.
Now, Honey will be unanswered forever now. Okay, great.
Wonderful.
So we're moving to the block, and we have MP Samari for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are for the Council of Innovators. Mr. Scavo or Madame O'Brien can answer. Mr. Scavio, in your presentation, you said that the programs are difficult and time-consuming. Can you illustrate what you're saying with examples? What do we need to change? And since I only have 2.5 minutes, I'd like to ask you, in C19, could you suggest any amendments that would help us improve innovation?
That question. I would say, in contrast to the other witnesses today, we are not coming with specific amendments. A lot of the elements in Budget 2022 that we saw were favorable in terms of innovation, but scarce on details. And so we're very much here to advocate for them to be set up in the right way. In terms of SHRED, there's just, I think the program is too burdensome. It's too complicated. And there is a lot of focus on hiring outside consultants just to navigate it. And so practically speaking, if you are a company who's applying for $1 million and it costs $100,000 just to navigate that process, and there's no guarantee that you will even receive it, there's less incentive to try something new. There's less incentive to innovate. And so that's really why our call is to streamline the program, to make it simpler, and to cover more expenses related to IP. If you are speaking to the talent side of things, I think the programs we have now just aren't fast enough in terms of immigration. So the Global Talent Stream, as a designated partner, of course, we support that program, but are there ways to get more talent here faster? One of the ways we do that is by ensuring that the NOC codes, which impact that program, are updated more regularly and are more in line with the innovation ecosystem and market needs. So a lot of different strategies, but we need to kind of operate on every level that we can and use a talent lens.
Je vous remercie beaucoup. Comme mon temps est pratiquement écoulé, mais
Thank you very much. I don't have much time left, so thank you, Mr. Chair.
And now to the NDP and MP Blakey for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I just, for our witnesses from JDRF, I know one of the suggestions you mentioned in your opening remarks was either eliminating or reducing the 14-hour requirement to 7 hours. I wonder if you could just expand a little bit more on what a reduction of that requirement from 14 to 7 hours would mean for folks who are living with diabetes.
So thank you for the question. I think what we're really trying to overcome here is healthcare practitioners are debating with patients, right, about the amount of time that they are spending on managing their type 1 diabetes. So by eliminating or reducing that, we're trying to kind of clear that, make that a lower hurdle for people to clear. So the debate's not at the healthcare practitioner world. I mean, I think Matt, said he could spend 100 hours a week, right, managing his diabetes. And then you get into debating about the time, like, is it 5 minutes on carbohydrates before a meal, or is it 3 minutes, right? Like, you end up in these debates. You still have type 1 diabetes, you still have the cost. It's turning into a debate about time, not about if you have the disease or the cost. It's almost like the debate's on the wrong topic for us right now.
And so is there a sense that with a 7-hour threshold that most people living with diabetes would easily be able to prove that, as opposed to, struggling to get all the way to 14 hours?
I think so. It would make I think it would just really make the bar much easier, especially because there are a couple new additional activities that are being added in this round of discussion, right? So I think between those two, we feel that it will make it much easier for people, and many more people will have access to it.
In the course of your advocacy on this, do you have a sense of whether there are other conditions that are in the same position as diabetes, who are struggling with the time requirements for something that's pretty, you either have type 1 diabetes or you don't. You either need to have ongoing insulin injections or you don't. Are there other conditions that are kind of that obvious in terms of what they require and why, and their additional expense that would also benefit from a similar change?
It's a great question. I mean, I think there's things that, things like dialysis come to mind where, you have to take that, and that would take hours a week to do, right? And then it may be the number of times you would need to do it a week. So it would be those sorts of conditions. I think what we end up, though, like for us, it's about all these little activities that add up to a lot of time, right? So I don't know if there's another one that's exactly like that, because every time Matt has to eat, right, he's calculating, making a series of calculations. Like it's a series of minutes that add up to hours.
Thank you. And thank you, MP Blakey. And now we'll hear from the Conservatives and MP Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go back to Mr. Clayton again. I just want to go over. We went through the you went through the amendments a little bit with Mr. Blakey, but we went through pretty quickly, and I want to make sure the government has time. Government members have fully time to get the notes they need to take back to finance. So could we just go through? I believe there were 3 elements of the amendments. Again, Mr. Clayton.
Yes. So the first one is to refine the proposed definition of qualifying disbursement. This is the mechanism that is the workaround for own activities. So to remove the reference to disbursement meeting prescribed conditions, and then that relates to the 800 words, and replace it with a requirement that the charity instead take reasonable steps to ensure that resources are dispersed and are used exclusively in the furtherance of charitable purpose. So from what I understand is this creates the hook that the CRA then can develop regulatory and accountability frameworks around.
So sorry, I'll just pause you. Maybe we'll pause after everyone. So that's to reduce the prescriptive, either to eliminate the own activities from the current regime, or to reduce the prescriptive nature of the sort of the new own activities that are as proposed in the BIA. Do I have that correct? Feel free to correct me if I'm not.
Yeah, it's the second option that you listed there. It would put a new set of requirements around this new mechanism. Nothing in the amendments gets rid of own activities. That still exists in the background.
Okay, thank you. The second amendment, please.
Yeah, the second one, to amend language related to directed giving. And this was problematic. I think it came from amateur sports somewhere. And it was a restriction that would keep Canadian charities from contributing to pooled funds and supporting non-qualified donees. So I think this relates to giving to restricted funds or for specific purposes, and then not being able to deliver those funds or be able to action them for the intended local entity or non-qualified donee.
Right, and that comes from when you said amateur sporting. Why that restriction's in place is, and it makes sense in that context, is that if you have a son or daughter who's an athlete, you want to make support them. You shouldn't necessarily be able to do that through a charitable gift, and that makes sense. But here, and I believe you have some personal experience through your organization. If you were to do that, someone wants to say, you know what, I want to give $1 million towards Ukrainian relief. That could be potentially stopped by this provision in the BIA. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Yes, if there was, if the designated gift or the gift was given specifically for a local entity in Ukraine, and was one of the charitable partners that we're engaged in and is accomplishing something consistent with our objects, yes, that would be difficult for us. It would be impossible for us to receive that gift, and would be very restrictive. A lot of Canadian organizations raise restricted funds for very specific purposes. So this would be very problematic.
Okay.
Can I go on to the third?
Yeah, we got time? Yeah, please.
The third one is very, very simple. Regulations that would be embedded into the Income Tax Act. Regulation 3703 needs to be deleted in its entirety. And this would allow for regulations to be in the CRA guidance documents rather than exist as codified rules in the Income Tax Act. Having rules in the Income Tax Act and in CRA policy will create a hierarchy and will create a chilling effect on ever using a mechanism that's in the Income Tax Act, because it wouldn't be reasonable, and it has to be entirely prescriptive. And as one of my friends said yesterday as I was talking about this, unless you achieve an A in all of those prescriptive categories, you could face censure from the Income Tax Act and lose your charitable status. So
some of the organizations you partner with are doing fantastic. So I had the pleasure of meeting the founder of Black Moms Connection. and their organization are fantastic, but they're not huge, and so it's very, very difficult for organizations such as theirs to abide by incredibly prescriptive and inflexible rules. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it was great bringing her to your office and to be able to talk about these details and to meet an example of someone that's trying to access charitable resources and can't do that. Under the current system, this new system would make it that much more difficult.
Thank you, MP Lawrence. And now we'll hear from MP Chattel for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chair. I would like to join my voice to my colleagues and acknowledge that I will be sorry not to be working on this committee with Ed, Mr. Short. He was very knowledgeable and a real asset to this committee. He was tough but fair. So my first question, ma première question.
My first question is for Ms. Grue. I'd like to ask you a few questions. Oh, she's gone. She's left. That's right. So perhaps, if I may, I could convey my question to her in writing. I have 2 reserves in my writing. I'd be very interested in taking a look at last year's budget, $2 million to accelerate programs as a result of the National Inquiry of Missing Indigenous Women and Girls and the calls for justice that came out of this inquiry. This money was used and will be used to fund a revitalization project to preserve culture, fight against racism and discrimination, and improve the health system, and to create adapted services for the community, improve access to justice for Indigenous people, and to help families and the survivors of MMIW. So my question to her would be, what impact did this investment have in the Indigenous communities? And I would like to know if she has seen, in concrete terms, the impact of this. So my question now will be for Mr. Schiavo. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about the impact that you see or you believe will have the Canadian Council for Economic Advisor.
Yeah, I might actually have my colleague handle that one.
Thank you, Nick. So thank you very much for the question. This is something that CCI has been calling on for a long time. I think, generally speaking, this is about capacity building. And so we have had a number of initiatives from across the government related to innovation in terms of creating economic panels. So we saw the Strategic Economic Table stood up and provided recommendations in 2018. Then we saw Dominic Barton's panel stood up and also provided recommendations on finance, the economy, and innovation. Then we saw the stand-up of the economic group led by Monique Leroux. And so all of those panels had been effectively established to create recommendations for government, which certainly probably served their purpose at that particular point in time, recovering from COVID, et cetera. And so what I think the opportunity here with this particular council is to create something that has permanence, that can actually be a bit of a sounding board for government on making decisions on a regular basis related to the economy and the data-driven innovation ecosystem. And so, unlike previous programs or patterns that we have seen with the government on initiatives related to this. We would hope that this particular council would be something that brings together experts from all fields. In particular, we would encourage the government to pull together experts that are really examining the data-driven economy and the 21st century economy to be a part of this economic council. We understand that there's more details to come in the fall economic statement, and look forward to engaging the government on that.
Thank you. And just as a final question, you raised, Monsieur Schiavo, at the beginning, the list of recommendation on talent, to retain the talent and skills in Canada in order to keep or to be successful in tomorrow's digital economy. Could you just give us like 3 main recommendations in that list?
In a very short answer, please.
Work with provinces to support students in terms of helping them pay off student debt, ensuring that we don't touch the current regime for employee stock options. This is incredibly important for small and medium-sized enterprises in terms of retaining employees. And there's other ideas in the budget, like employee trusts that we're currently exploring that could be used to retain employees. So a number of recommendations using a talent lens.
You, MP Chatel and Mr. Schiavo, very succinct. We're moving into round 3, and we have MP Patzer. Welcome to our committee, MP Patzer. You have 5 minutes to ask questions.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to be able to join the committee here today. I'm going to start with the Canadian Council of Innovators. I've seen you guys at committee a few different times, and there's been a common theme, I would say, that's emerged from listening to you guys quite a bit, and that is that there is an issue with getting our startups to scale up. We've seen, though, in provinces like Alberta, for example, where, government reduction of red tape has encouraged even more startups to pop up and looking to grow. So how can the federal government be more like Alberta and work with these companies in the private sector to be able to get them to not just start, but to scale up?
Thank you very much for the question. Alberta is a really interesting use case right now. Their tech unemployment rate is at 0, and they are crying for tech talent. I think that Minister Schweitzer out in Alberta has done a pretty good job at working with innovators across the board. And I think that they recognize that there is this necessary transition that needs to take place from sort of, old economics to new economics. And, credit provided where credit is due. The engagement on a number of initiatives, including a data strategy, including an IP strategy, thinking about how to bring venture capitalists into the mix and start having conversations about what investment looks like there. Creating, as I've mentioned today and in several committee sessions before, those marketplace frameworks for what it's going to look like for foreign direct investment to set up in Alberta. And to be honest, championing local domestic technology companies. Alta ML is a great company out in Alberta that has just led the way and is taking startups under their arms and building that ecosystem of network effect that I think is really critical. And so, I mean, if I could sum it all up, I think it's really just championing local domestic technology companies and saying we're open for business, we're ready. And then just to your point around reducing some of the regulatory burdens, there's been a number of conversations about what that looks like, and I think that those certainly need to continue as things move forward in Alberta, and of course with the federal government as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess I kind of got a two-part question here for you. The first question is a pretty simple one, and that's how important is broadband to innovation? And then the second one is, we've seen multiple announcements of funding, for broadband, which is fine. It seems it's to be a constant announcement over and over again. But, touring around rural Canada, talking to colleagues all across the country, we haven't really seen a lot of development, though, of broadband access for people. In the last 2 years, we've really seen the exasperation of the need for a very strong and robust, access to broadband. So I'm just wondering if you want to touch point on that, because I think there's $2.75 billion available in the budget. But, what do we need to do to get out of the way so that the private sector can just get these dollars into production, so that way people can have broadband access?
Yeah, great questions. I think they're heavily correlated, and I'll respond with two correlated questions as well. I think certainly we need to have a decision on Huawei. That has been something that the government has been pushing off for the last few months, and Canadian companies who are able to deliver the analogous services are waiting in the wings to find out what that decision will be. And then the second thing is this remote shift from, leaving urban centers to working wherever you need to. It's a phenomenon that's taking place all over the world. So the need for rural broadband, I think, has only exacerbated. There are some companies that have already started delivering some of those services through satellites. Great technology. We need to make sure that we're doing it right and serving people correctly. And if the government is going to be entering into some of these larger contracts, I think it's going to be really critical that there's transparency around those contracts and what that actually means for Canadians living in rural parts of Canada.
Thank you very much. You know what? I've got 30 seconds left, I think, Chair. I'm just going to cede my last 30 seconds because my next question will take much longer than that. So, sure, if Dan wants it, Dan can have it.
30 seconds.
Thank you. And if I could do the same thing as MP Chattel and just to the Native Women's Association, thank them for coming, but just to ask them, A, were they consulted on the budget for this year? And B, did they get any of the items that they had recommended to government? Is it reflected in C19? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, MP Albas, and the clerk will reach out with those questions for the members. We are now moving to the Liberals and MP Baker for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I am going to focus my questions on the Council of Canadian Innovators. It's great to see you both again, Dana. It's great to see you again, and Dana, and to you and to you, Mr. Schiavo. You know, in your response to the federal budget, I think I read that you wrote that that this is an innovation budget through and through. I think is what I read. Am I getting that right? And if so, can you tell me what you meant by that?
Certainly, and you are correct. It's on the record. Our media release did say through and through. Look, I think the narrative behind the intention of how we wanted to celebrate this budget was really it's a signal to the economy and the innovation economy more specifically that we are turning a corner on recovery. We're turning a corner on COVID. Not that it's completely over for a lot of communities across the country, but acknowledging that where we are starting to turn our gaze as a country is around this idea that we need to start digging our heels in and thinking about what's good for Canada's prosperity. I think what was really interesting in Minister Freeland's comments around the budget, in media after and her speech in the House was the recognition that Canada does have a productivity problem. And I think that is simply a result of just antiquated policy around innovation. It was obviously exacerbated by this rapid acceleration of people having to work from home and what does that look like for the digital economy. But certainly we were very pleased to see a number of initiatives that were in the budget, as my colleague Nick had mentioned. So SR&ED reform is a huge piece. Funding to go towards cybersecurity, which I think the government certainly recognizes as a serious issue now. Considerations around skilling, reskilling, upskilling, attracting talent, more mention around IP, and of course some nods to the fintech and clean tech sector. So certainly, we always say the devil is in the details, or the proof is in the pudding. And I know that there are some initiatives that need to roll out sequentially, and we're waiting for some more details to come in fall economic statement. But we were very pleased to see a number of initiatives in this budget, and we would underscore that it's critically important to consult with Canadian innovators to ensure that a lot of the implementation is done in a way that will support the growth of Canada's innovation ecosystem.
Yeah, fair enough. My next question was I think linked up with what you just said. I was curious about whether you could tell us about some of the measures that the Canadian innovators have been pushing for that have appeared in the budget. And maybe you just listed them, but I'm wondering if you could go through them again.
Sure, absolutely. So we always kind of house our advocacy in sort of four main buckets. So access to talent, access to capital, access to customers, which is around procurement and international trade opportunities, and these marketplace frameworks, which I've mentioned today. So working backwards, the marketplace framework piece, as I mentioned, in digital sectors, finding that the FinTech initiative to launch a financial sector legislative review focused on digitization of money directed at digital currencies. And I think, interestingly enough, again, at this particular moment in time, will include cryptocurrency and stablecoins. Some of the clean tech initiatives around creating investment tax for organizations that are focused on net zero technologies and battery storage. Cybersecurity, a massive investment there, $875 million over 5 years. I think that this definitely indicates to the market that the government is getting serious about cybersecurity. Tax updates related to SHRED, as mentioned, I think are still underway. And then access to customers, developing new tools and guidelines to support green procurement, and money going in towards health technology procurement, which is a huge barrier for Canadian technology companies that are in the health space in terms of accessing their own markets. Access to capital was interesting. Again, I think we've already talked today about the Innovation Investment Agency and how that will be really critical to get right, and will need to be steered by experts in terms of how that operationally sets up and what that looks like for outputs in the Canadian economy. And the Canadian Growth Fund as well. I know that that was mentioned by one of your colleagues earlier today about attracting the right kind of investment to Canada will be really critical. So I hope that's a helpful list on that front.
That's a fulsome list. Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it.
And thank you. And thank you, MP Baker. Now to the block, MP Samari for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to pursue my line of questioning with the Council of Canadian Innovators. My questions will deal with the ecosystem of startups. How did startups get through the COVID pandemic and lockdown? We know they had difficulties. That's my first question. And secondly, how to better accompany them? A lot of my colleagues talk about the importance of bringing them allowing them to upscale. We have venture risk capital. We have innovation. Often American businesses do, in fact, support these businesses. Do we need to have some type of patient capital investment for these people? So how did startups get through the crisis? And secondly, how to accompany them? Is this idea of patient capital something that we should consider?
Merci for the question, and I will answer the first question in English and send it over to my colleague to answer in French. So startups, scale-ups, technology companies across the board in the very early days of the panic mode of the pandemic, obviously that was a very scary time. I will say that the first iteration of the wage subsidy that came out rendered 80% of the innovation economy ineligible. And so quickly we went back to the drawing board and provided some feedback to the government, and there were some amendments made, and we saw that new wage subsidies were available through different regional development organizations and IRAP, et cetera. So I do believe that we were able to push the dial and getting some of those pieces in place in order to support the economy on that front. So I think, like most companies, it was a very difficult, unstable time. And then there was all of a sudden this very quick turnaround for a number of digital companies who knew that they had to kind of either pivot or get into action, supporting the work from home operations. And some companies came out very well on the other side, but of course, just like many small businesses in Canada, suffered significantly. So not so great at the beginning, and then things turned around quite quickly. But I think that was just a matter of the fact that we had no idea what was happening or where things were going. And that was something that was, being felt globally. And I'll turn my second question to my colleague who will respond in French.
Merci, Dana. Je sais que...
Thank you, Dana. I know that I'm supposed to speak in French, but I think that I will continue in English, if that's okay.
We've kind of lost track of the question, but I think one thing that's unique about CCI is that we represent specifically the scale-up community in Canada, so those scale-ups that are headquartered here in Canada. So to your second question, I would just reiterate what we've talked about today, which is ensuring we have the right marketplace frameworks and the freedom to operate for our scale-ups is critical. Ensuring that they are able to commercialize and get past that startup phase is something we really struggle with here in Canada. And so in addition to having a strong IP regime, the other elements that we've discussed, a national data strategy, review of the Competition Act, open banking frameworks that we're actively engaged in, these are all regulations that help our companies grow with clear rules and responsibilities and ultimately create a fair playing field. Merci.
Merci, MP Saint-Marie. And now to MP Blakey for 2.5 minutes. I think you're on mute still. Yep.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I was saying that I'm just going to continue in a similar vein to Monsieur Saint-Marie, who I think was asking around the kind of capital requirements of scaling up. That often the model in Canada seems to be that companies will develop a product to the point where it's ready for a wider commercialization and then sell to a firm, a U.S. firm or a firm from somewhere else who then takes that work on. And so he was asking if it makes sense to have a kind of, a rough translation of the French, I guess, is just patient capital. Maybe that's the term in English as well. And what could be done in order to put that in place so that when products are ready for scale up, that there's a better kind of financing infrastructure already available and in place. So I wonder if you want to speak to that, or if you think that's not really the main issue and it's some of the other factors that you were discussing before.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think I might actually turn that over to my colleague.
Sure. Sorry, I was confused as whether the question was to us or to another colleague here. Anyhow, yes, patient capital. It's funny because people think patient, people in hospitals. It's not what it is. Patient capital is that long-term investment, that long-term play. We often see that, VCs like to see, early double digits of their return on a sort of 3 to 4 year investment. With the dips, the highs and lows that we've seen in the economy in the past few years as a result of COVID and now this market dip that we're experiencing right now, I absolutely think that patient capital needs to be a big part of the mix. And so we also saw, the government made the announcement around the VC Vicky funding this week. And those types of incentives bring venture capitalists and other investors to the table and kind of create an assurance that there will be an opportunity for a bit longer term. So anytime the government really puts their hand up and says, we want to be a part of this, there is a bit more of a guarantee that that patient capital can persist. It gives the outside private sector investors a bit of assurances that if the government is at the table, that they're in it for the long game. So the thing that's really interesting about this concept of patient capital is it really depends on the sector. So we see clean technology companies, which are very capital intensive because they're investing in equipment and manufacturing and a lot of R&D to get, let's keep it simple, a solar panel prepared to go to market versus a software as a service company, which everything can be done in the cloud, and you've got a bunch of kids sitting in shorts and working in laptops and co-working spaces or at home. And the ability to scale up a company that's kind of, just all here, operating here versus how you actually build material and test it for market are two very different things. And so in the business of clean technology and also to a certain degree in health technology, when talking about medical devices, that patient capital is essential in terms of making sure that those products can slowly make their way to market. The other side of that is, with patient capital investments, there's often big regulatory hurdles, and those who are making the investments need to recognize that sometimes overcoming, requirements that are related to the FDA approval or Health Canada approval or standards approvals for particular clean technology pieces, that patient capital piece is a really big part of the equation.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Blakey. Now we're moving to the Conservatives. MP Stewart for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to my questions with JDRF. I mean, thinking about the disability tax credit, what would be the ideal outcome to make life better for the 300,000 plus Canadians with type 1 diabetes? Would it be to amend the BIA to remove the 14-hour rule by deeming Canadians with type 1 diabetes as automatically qualifying for the life-sustaining therapy criteria in the disability tax credit?
That would be ideal for sure, because that, insulin is a life-sustaining therapy, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And once you've got type 1 diabetes, you have it for life. So that would definitely be the simplest way to make it accessible for everybody.
I appreciate that. To me, that seems like the gold standard. And as I was reading some of your opinions and some of the platform for JDRF, I seen that basically there's another idea where you could agree to reduce to 7 hours or removing the 14 hours for all medical conditions that require life-sustaining therapy may cause unintended consequences regarding administration with the CRA. Basically, should an amendment be targeted specifically for type 1 diabetes given the circumstances of the condition? And what would that amendment look like to JDRF?
Well, first of all, I mean, we champion for people with type 1 diabetes. So I guess if it is possible to make something that would be focused for type 1 diabetics, that would be fantastic, right? That would be wonderful, because it would probably give clarity to a specific condition that is different than others. And I think if we could make an amendment, we would probably ask to have the hours eliminated or reduced. Because we're really debating, as I said earlier, about the number of minutes spent on a whole series of activities all day long, right? Then you have to then debate with your healthcare practitioner. So we're just really trying to find an equitable solution for those with type 1 diabetes, for everybody.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your answer. As I said the other day when you were here, I grew up knowing quite a few people that had type 1 diabetes, and definitely seen the struggle that parents face, and both adults that had the condition faced as they got older living in this country. And I just think that it's important that JDRF know that we had a former leader that brought forth something similar to assist in the disability tax credit area, and I think that I support removing it entirely for the people with type 1 diabetes, and I know that I speak for the members of my party as well. And as I mentioned earlier, there'll be something coming forth from us, not today. It's in another aspect of the committee, but I think that this is long overdue for people with type 1. And you mentioned your colleague mentioned how sleep deprived his wife becomes. I know people in this situation, and mothers are waking up constantly at 3 and 4 in the morning, a couple of them that I know, and I just know the stress it takes. So that's really all my questions for today. I think it's just important that JDRF know that I support removing this entirely so that everyone with type 1 diabetes can qualify automatically for the disability tax credit. The members of my party agree with this. Something is coming forward, and I'm really hopeful that all the members of this committee and all the parties will support it, because we have the power at this committee to make decisions and make changes that can affect Canadians. So I just wanted you to know that that's forthcoming. That's all my questions. If I have more time, I could give it over.
You have a minute. 1 minute.
Thank you. Great. If I could just ask the Council of Canadian Innovators, earlier there was a mention about Huawei and having a decision on that. The government has been promising this since before the 2019 election. Could you please maybe expand upon why having basic certainty on things like 5G is helpful to your organization and those you represent?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. I think, as I mentioned in my comments previously, there are a number of Canadian companies who can offer and deliver the same services, and sort of delaying on a decision around what sort of market entry Huawei has into Canada just signals that Canadian companies are kind of just sitting on the sidelines and waiting for an answer on that. So I don't want to get into the diplomacy pieces that are related to the contract itself, but I think it's going to be really critical that a decision comes, and a decision comes soon, so innovators are able to recognize and respond.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Albus. And now we're going to the Liberals, and welcome to our committee, MP Shanahan.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. It is a pleasure to be here with my colleagues who we have met in other committees, in other forums. But really interesting. I've been listening with great interest to the questions and the answers of the witnesses here today. And I'm sorry I did miss the opening remarks, so I hope I don't repeat anything, but I am very intrigued. I don't think we've heard from the witness from the Samaritan's Purse of Canada, Samaritan's Purse Canada, and I do have a question for that witness. Who is that witness?
That is Mr. Clayton.
Mr. Clayton, very good. So, Mr. Clayton, first of all, I would like to commend you and your organization on the tremendous humanitarian work that you conduct all over the world. And given that this is, and I don't want to mispronounce it, but Vishivanka Day, and we do have interns here from Ukraine. I want to ask you about your work in Ukraine. Your organization has been doing tremendous work helping Ukrainian refugees in Poland, and I can only imagine how quickly you had to mobilize to get to Poland, Moldova, and then here in Canada to do this work. The federal government has announced over $100 million in spending to implement and operate the new Canada-Ukraine authorization for emergency travel and a special permanent residency stream alongside hundreds of millions for humanitarian and military aid to Ukraine. Please talk to us about the impact of these investments, but also about the heroic work that your staff is performing during this crisis.
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to our work in Ukraine. It was my privilege on Sunday at 2 p.m. at Pearson International to receive 28 Ukrainians on an aircraft that we had coming back from Poland, landed in Toronto, and I got to spend the entire afternoon with them at the airport. They're now in Vegreville, Alberta, the home of the world's largest Easter egg. So they're in familiar territory and wonderful people. We're anticipating receiving another 21 people on tomorrow, on Friday. We continue to be active. I know there's many other organizations that are very active across Ukraine and the periphery. So our current activities using the donor support that we have is in the 17 projects that we are currently funding in Poland and in a number of other European countries supporting displaced and refugee Ukrainians that have made their way across Europe. So we're very active with that. Our particular interest here today is about direction and control, own activities, and the specific provisions that are in the Budget Implementation Act. And I trust that you'd make yourself, or we could make available to you the specific amendments that we are seeking. I've already spoken to with MP Lawrence. We see that it's very important for us to keep our charitable sector and the way that we can function modernized and to update things. So that's something that we're seeking. And it's really great to hear you recognizing our work. We have a lot of Canadians. We've had, I think, 70 Canadians that are that have served in Ukraine in our emergency field hospital and the work that we're doing across the country. So there's an awful lot going on, and Canada plays a big part across the entire charitable sector in Ukraine. Thank you.
And Mr. Clayton, could you talk about the kinds of investments that the federal government is making? I mean, have you seen something similar to this before? What does this do to really up the game, if I can say that, in delivering emergency assistance and helping in this unprecedented situation?
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to what the government of Canada is doing. I can speak specifically to this immigration program that has been established, and I can only commend those that came up with this plan to be able to vet Ukrainians that would be eligible to come over here. It has been a relatively easy process that we have witnessed firsthand, and the great work of the CBSA authorities in terms of making that possible. So I don't know about the specifics of resources that are going. I just observe things in the news, and I think we're making a significant contribution as a country for the Ukrainian people.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you, MP Shanahan, and of course, for recognizing Vyshyvanka Day and great questions. Members, I'm looking at the time right now. We've got about 8-9 minutes, so about 2 minutes per party, as we usually do, till we conclude our meeting for today. So we'll start with the Conservatives for 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to go back to the Canadian Council. Just in regards, you said that there are technology companies here in Canada that are waiting for a decision from the government on Huawei, so because they can offer other services. You know, I'm very concerned that we have so much where, for equity reasons, for financing, people are moving their businesses from Canada down to the United States. Do you feel that if we don't answer basic questions on what is allowed and what isn't, that companies, Canadian companies, may seek to go to places where that they have more regulatory certainty and they can raise the necessary capital to participate?
To be absolutely honest with you, we haven't seen a huge departure of Canadian companies leaving Canada at this point in time. There's always the threat, and some companies have either folded or been acquired by U.S. firms. And simply due to the fact that we have a huge talent supply here in Canada, because we're one of the most educated countries in the world, and we're producing PhD and highly educated STEM talent from universities across the country. So I think sometimes that kind of notion that Canadian companies are ready to pack up and leave Canada, tomorrow is a lot more challenging than it actually appears to be. But I do certainly think that there are provisions that we've identified across the board today that will impact a decision whether or not a Canadian company would like to expand in Canada or maybe open up an office in the United States. So I think that's sort of the distinction there.
Thank you.
And if I can just add on that.
Oh, okay, very quickly, please.
Just generally speaking, I think there's a lot more that can be done in terms of procurement for Canadian companies that have the right solutions. We see this a lot in the cyber sector, where in some cases they have more luck with the American government than Canada. So the more we can utilize Canadian innovation for our needs, the better.
Thank you, and thank you, MP Albus. MP McDonald for the Liberals for the final questions.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back to Mr. St-Mary's question relevant to some companies or some persons not being available to collect SUs. I know the federal government put in place relatively quickly the IAP, which was about $250 million. Do you know how many companies actually or persons took advantage of that $250 million during COVID?
Sorry,
Mr. Scavvy, yeah.
Sorry, that was
Dana,
directed.
go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I apologize. The question was directed to us. My apologies. That's a really good question. I don't know specifically on the data, and I can come back to you. But as I mentioned before, about I would render to guess that there was probably about 80 to 90% of our are companies that had some sort of interaction with the wage subsidy for sure in its second iteration.
Okay, thank you. And very quickly, we talked about labor, we talked about seed companies and startups, and we have likely one of the best incubators in the world, or it was ranked #1 in the world on the corner of Yonge and Dundas, of course, the DMZ, which I had a lot of interaction with in a previous life. And I'm just wondering, how closely do you work with those types of post-secondary or organizations or institutions, because they have a phenomenal track record of building new companies here right in Canada and growing this industry tenfold?
Yeah, look, our kind of, MO is all boats should rise together in Canada. So we work closely with several accelerators, incubators, and some university and different programs. Recently, there's a new upskilling initiative that was just out for RFI last week and closed. And there are a number of organizations such as CCI that are helping to try and think about what their reskilling and upskilling initiatives look like for tomorrow. But we try our best really to expand our wings, and all with the goal of helping Canadian domestic companies grow.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. Thank you, MP MacDonald. And moving to the block for your final questions, we have MP Sainte-Marie for 2 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for the JDRF. First of all, I'd like to say hello to Mr. Stimson and say that I found your testimony very touching. It helps us to imagine what it's like to live with type 1 diabetes. It's difficult. So we wish from the bottom of our hearts that research will help you have an easier life. And meanwhile, I find that the proposal from Mr. Stewart makes absolute sense. We will look at that and support it. My question is for Mr. Proton. Where is research right now in Canada compared to other countries, and how can the federal government better support juvenile diabetes research?
First of all, thank you for the question and for supporting the amendment to make it easier for people to get the disability tax credit. That's fantastic. Canada, since the Banting and Best discovered insulin, have, I would say, we've hit above our weight in diabetes research. We're leaders in stem cell work, right, to turn stem cells into insulin-producing cells. I listened to some colleagues like Dana and Nick about innovative companies. This is a sector that we would like to expand and grow in Canada as well. We think it's a really significant opportunity for us. And I think the government could continue to invest in, I would say, basic research, at universities and hospitals, but all the way through to commercialization, because ultimately we want to get new therapies to patients. So it is about, supporting the spectrum of research in Canada.
Merci. Merci, MP Sainte-Marie. And now to the NDP, and these will be our final questions for this session. MP Blakey.
Thank you. I'd just like to circle back to Mr. Clayton. I'm wondering if you could give an example out of your own experience with international organizations, how the current rules impede good program delivery.
Yeah, well, I just think of most recently with our Ukraine response, in the initial days of our combined response as an organization, an international organization, we struggled to identify a specific aspect of our Samaritan's Purse work that is only one work in Ukraine, and to identify our own activities. So we struggled to come up with a legal agreement and an arrangement with our international headquarters to take on all of the operations of our Moldova office for a period of time. So instead of really being able to contribute to the full aspects of what it was that we were doing as an organization, we had to hive off a specific part of it and create a legal agreement that would make that our own activities. Organizations all across Canada are carrying out these legal agreements, and as some has referred to them, these legal fictions that need to be created because of own activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and thank you, MP Blakey. And I just want to say first to our witnesses. This Finance Committee it's a fast committee. It's a busy committee. I know things change very quickly, and we want to thank you for with very short notice and short order. Within 24 hours, you were able to accommodate and come before us and answer all these questions with your expertise. So, on behalf of the members of the committee. The clerk, thank you, clerk, for all your hard work and making this happen, and the analysts, the interpreters, and everybody. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members.